So it's been a little bit since we've actually been on Confab. So thank you to all who are able to join. If you haven't been a part of Confab in the past, just at a high level, what Confab is really about kind of demystifying how we look at technology in the business system space, and really how consultants go through learning, ideology, how we actually basically ideate on how we use these solutions to then really support businesses. And at Stoneridge here, we've now kind of focused on many of the different Microsoft products, right? So we support both Dynamics, Microsoft 365, and also Azure workloads. So today we felt, hey, you know what? Teams is getting a revamp coming up here pretty soon. Let's talk a little bit about Teams and some of the capabilities that you can use to really basically join a lot of the different types of elements in your organization from a data perspective by using then Teams to go through that. And that means things like chat, loop, different concepts that are out there. And I'm actually going to be using our production environment to go through this to kind of show, what can you do inside of Teams to basically tackle maybe some of the business process needs that you have inside of your organization, how you can use it to unify collaboration, communication, and then even access to apps and systems inside of our environment. So looking forward today to kind of going through that in some more detail with all of you. I'm a pretty avid Teams user, as you can imagine, being part of the Microsoft stack. So I'm really hoping that maybe you'll get one or two things out of this, right? Like, especially you more senior people that use Teams. It's always great when I can get one or two things that you didn't know about, that you learn about, that you can use then to just make your job a little bit easier. And maybe it's just quality of life. Maybe it's a big enhancement in terms of time savings, right? So we'll make sure we go through that as well. Rob, happy Halloween as well to you. It's kind of scary. I didn't have a theme. I'm trying to survive with 3 kids right now. We've got Halloween, obviously, that we're going to be running out to right after work and going and doing trick or treating. So it should be a lot of fun. The kids have all their costumes. My daughter is dressing up as a witch, and my son is Bumblebee. And then my eldest is, he doesn't really dress up anymore. He's too cool for that. So we'll wait, when he's 25, I'm sure he'll start dressing up again, right? We all go through that phase. So either way, it's going to be a great time. I'm happy that there's not this huge snowstorm that's coming, kind of like we've had in the past. If you're old like me, you probably remember some of those wonderful blizzards on Halloween, and then how we just would trudge through it, whereas nowadays it doesn't seem like that would happen. So, Ravi, good to see you as well. Clyde, yeah, Clyde's like, I'm scary enough for everyone. Yeah. Me and you, buddy. Me and you. Trust me. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. And yeah, Leah, my fave, Teams, Copilot summaries, and suggested actions, right? Yeah, we're going to have some fun here, Leah. And I may actually be pinging you in the background here as we go through this, just as an FYI. So you don't have to accept anything. I'm just trying to show what some of the capabilities are, and we'll go back and forth through chat with that. All right, team. Like with that, let's go ahead and kind of jump in here almost right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and open up Teams and basically just be focused to start on my Teams area here. And then we're going to go through, obviously, some of the capabilities here, just so you can understand, once again, like how can we use this to really unify our environment. And at Stoneridge, what I can do is I can personally relate like what we've done to be able to get to that level, because it's not like all of a sudden we started using Teams and we're like, yeah, this is fantastic. It was quite the opposite. We came from Skype for business in our organization, and if you remember the very first Teams client that came out, it needed a lot. We'll just say it like that, and I'd be curious on in chat here, team, as what you think about it as well. But when we made that transition, it is what it was, right? So it was Microsoft saying Skype for Business is dead, long live Teams, and then you find out when you start doing some of the programming in the back end that Skype for Business is still alive and still in there. It's just been reshelled, basically, is what it boils down to. So it's going to be fun to kind of go through this to just relate like what the improvements have been as well, such as being able to actually have chats that pop out, or being able to have multiple windows open. If you remember the very first iteration, we didn't have a lot of those basic capabilities. And then also how Teams themselves have evolved a little bit, right? And then how we can use, as Leah said, Copilot to really then even interact further, obviously, with chats, channels, and all that data that we interact with. So I'm looking forward to today. It's going to be a little bit of a refresher for me too, because it's been a while since I've done anything in Teams to present. So I'm looking forward to it. And I guess the key thing here, team, would be as you're kind of going through this and seeing the capabilities, feel free to spam the chat with any comments, any areas you want me to show as well. Obviously, we'll be able to go into those and dig in a little bit deeper as well as we go through that. So let's go ahead and flip over to my main screen and see if we can get that displayed. And there we go. All right, so Teams. Yeah, Teams, Rob. Teams is Skype in a costume. I do not disagree with that. That is absolutely right. So here's Teams, right? So what is Teams like? Let's start like what Teams really is. So Teams was designed at the very beginning to really be that collaboration application that you would use to basically manage your teams, your chats, and your interactions, obviously, within the organization. And it's become even more, right? And technically, I'd say that the core argument for Teams back in the day was the introduction of Slack, right? So Slack is the competing non-Microsoft product in my mind that typically does a lot of those collaboration-based activities. And there are a bunch of people that use that type of stack, right? Where we use Slack, Jira, and a couple like Confluence as another one as well. And really, you know, it's very more akin then to Slack, but with a little bit of like Jira and Confluence kind of built into it. So it is a little bit different, but at the same point, it's just designed really for that collaboration perspective. Now, it's expanded beyond anything, as you can imagine, and you can kind of see then on my far left that now Teams is like a platform, right? Where you can install applications, you can do loop components that are related to it, you name it, you can pretty much do it, right? And so you can see here, for example, like when we're going through a lot of our opportunities and processing, like in the general for our sales and marketing leadership, we have posts that are basically occurring like loss analysis, or as you can see here, Christina actually has a sales and leadership team site that she has as well that was kind of put inside of here. The key thing is though is that it's all about that communication, right? So come from that lens, come from the understanding lens of, all right, Teams is going to be my communication platform that I use, but it's going to be so much more. And I'm going to show you why it's so much more than that. Now, at the core components of Teams, what you're going to have are a couple of things. And we can look at one other environment as well that I'll kind of spin up in the background here so you can see it. But basically, at the highest level, your chat, your activity, your teams on the far left, as I'm kind of showing on the arrows here as I highlight it. You may not be able to see the cursor, but then also our calendar, and then calls, and then a OneDrive are really those core components that are typically used inside of Microsoft Teams. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show my pre-sales environment too, and this is what's really cool about Teams is the fact that you can also have it set up where you can access Teams then via web, right? So you can actually connect, for example, via your browser to teams.microsoft.com and then open up Teams and then use the web interface, which is very similar then to the interface that is exposed inside of here. So this is my pre-sales one, for example, that I have that's set up inside of here. And then this is our production Stoneridge one that's inside of here as well. So I've got two different teams set up, one with the app and then one with the browser. So why is this convenient? If you think about it, if you've got multiple accounts that you want to actually manage, you can have one in the browser, one open obviously in the team. But what you can also do on the Teams, if I click on my top right up here, is that I can actually flip over into, for example, different types of accounts that are set up inside of Teams. Now, there's good and bad to this, right? So the bad is when I do that, you'll watch, there goes Teams, bam, goodbye, stoneridgesoftware.com, right? So now I'm not getting any messages for Stoneridge Software because I've changed the context of the user that I'm operating under. Whereas if I do it this way, where I operate under Stoneridge Software as an example, and then what I do over here is I actually go into basically our Copilot section here that is in our browser, you can see basically that I am able to be logged in twice at the same time. And so cool thing about this, if you have multiple accounts, you can use the browser to do that. So at least you can be on chat. You can also then do some of the calling features that are related to it as well, but just note that it's a nice little trick just to kind of understand if you have multiple accounts, if you need to have them open and you need to look at, for example, maybe another account and you're on a call, for example, Well, you don't want to click on that switch user because if you do, it's going to disconnect you basically from that call. So a nice little feature just to kind of note as you go through that. Now, beyond that, as you saw from Teams, we have the ability to interact with chats. So you can see here, for example, we have a dry run presentation that we're kind of going through with the team that I'm tackling. So as you can see, there's some details here that we're kind of going through and working on, obviously. I've got chats with Deb. I've got my one-on-ones that we've actually had conversation around. So these are all the different types of chats that basically you can interact with. And one of the nice features here that I'd just like to kind of just identify is the fact that if you want to take chats and open them in a new window, we have the ability basically to take that chat and then basically go through and then display that inside of here very quickly and easily. So you can see from some of these other chats, if I pick like a one-on-one, I can pop that out, and then all of my one-on-one conversations with Bill, for example, are in a separate window that I can move around, that I can stack and do some other things that are related to it. Now, the reason I highlight that obviously is around the fact that being able to pop out chats was a feature that you didn't have in the past, which is a really nice feature now, right? So that's a really key component as well. Now, Teams is the other component with this, right, that we were looking at before, where basically what you can do is you can generate or create new teams or channels, or potentially even then join those teams or channels. So what is a team? Highest level, a team is a grouping or collaboration space for you to be able to tackle work that needs to be done inside of the business. So as an example, we have like Stoneridge Companies as one of our teams. And in Stoneridge Companies, we have then the different channels that are things like our product development channel, or the news that happens in technology that Eric might be posting, or our general channel that's inside of here that just might have general details really about, for example, Stoneridge Companies. So there's many different ways that you can build out basically this structure inside of Teams, where you could do it where it's to a company, or you could also do it more towards like departments, right? So like I've got my pre-sales team channel inside of here, and then in my pre-sales team, I did the channels that are inside of it by different types of products and then industries that we support as well, as kind of an example here that you can create. But you can see, like in our clients and prospects, that you can have different content of teams all the way to, like as an example, I'll just kind of scroll down here, you can see these are a lot of our existing customers that we interact with basically at Stoneridge. And what we do is we create a team site for every single customer that we interact with then as part of it. And then inside of that customer, we then break out, for example, the channels that are related then to that particular customer, where we have a delivery, sales, support, and then a technical information channel that we actually maintain then in our team sites. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, because here's the cool thing about this. We auto-generate all these. We build basically the channels. We add the apps to the channels. We link dynamics then and embed it inside of, for example, the sales channel so we can see the account details that are related to it. So it's a really nice feature to be able to basically take a group of people that can then interact, obviously, from a delivery, sales, and support perspective that we have on our team as a part of that process. So once again, teams have a team that you can create, and then channels in that team. And then in those channels, if we just pop one open, let's take the pre-sales team, because that's one I can break and not beg for forgiveness around. But when I click on my Business Central one as an example, what you can see is that inside of this channel, so my team and my channel, I then have basically the different apps and interactions that I can do with that particular team. I can look at the posts that are related to it. I can look at files that are saved inside of this workspace. I can click on the items, for example, and then pull up some detail about item detail. And what's really cool about this is that it's actually using then, for example, Business Central to connect basically into the environment, right? So it looks like this one doesn't have the right setup right now, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But what can happen here is that you can actually take these, and if I click on files as the example, this will actually then expose, for example, the OneDrive that's created as well with this team. So, and this is food for thought for all of you that use Teams. So when you create a team, it has the ability to do things more than just creation of a team that's stored maybe somewhere in Microsoft Graph, right? What it also does is it can set up, for example, a security or distribution group that's related to that team. So if I actually look for the pre-sales team now in my email aliases in Outlook, I'm going to see that that's now available because it actually creates an Active Directory or an Entra group related then to that team. It also then stands up, for example, a SharePoint site in the background that then links the OneDrive then to the team. And so what's happened here is that there's a plethora of different technologies that Microsoft used to then join basically that detail into one interface as you go through a lot of your processing. So an example here is that I can also then, for example, upload files. I can even go ahead and then open this, for example, inside of SharePoint. And what we're going to see here in just a second, after I go ahead and log in, because we're logging in obviously for my Stoneridge login, the same content now from a SharePoint perspective is exposed inside of here. And even a SharePoint site, a team site, was actually generated basically for the pre-sales team when I created that team. So there's different configuration that you can use to drive this to see how deep you want it to scale, obviously. But it is a nice welcome feature because then if you have some people that don't need access to Teams for some reason, they can at least access maybe some of that detail then inside of SharePoint to be able to basically interact then with maybe some of those documents. Now, here's the thing to note, and this is personal opinion with it. I'm sure there's many other opinions, right, that are out there. I actually prefer to never access SharePoint anymore. I typically always just interact with Teams. The exception to that might be with some of the document repositories. Like when you have a very large document repository, or like we have a bug in one of our menus that we created where you have to pretty much open it in SharePoint to be able to get to, for example, some of those files. So, but beyond that, the only other scenario would be to think about would be in Teams. Remember, Teams is more of an internal collaborative tool. It's not as good externally collaborative. And what I mean by that, even like recording videos that you then share to people, for example, or like if you want to give people guest access to it, you can do that. But remember, it's not as fully baked compared to maybe some of the other products like SharePoint and OneDrive, which have had more focus around that. But it is something to note where that might be the exception. So in our environment, for example, we create a team site that's related to that project or that client and prospect. And then what happens is we create a delivery specific SharePoint site to then interact basically with our prospect or client when we're going through our project methodology, right? So something to note is that you may want to consider the external sharing. And I'm just going to be super candid with everyone here that it knows Teams. Microsoft is not very good at stating what features they've added impact or do not impact external guest users. I'm hoping in the future we're going to have more documentation around that so that when they introduce a feature, like when they went to the new Teams, there were features with external users that no longer worked for some reason, but they worked in the classic or old Teams as we called it. So just note that, you know, internal collaboration, fantastic. External, better every day, but not what I would classify as the true collaborative experience with external users. And just to kind of note that, I mean, you can, for example, add external users and chat with them and interact with them, right? So it's just something to note as you do that. And like Rob had said in chat, secure by design, you nailed it, right? Like we're looking at, this is business data, this is tenant specific data that we want to be very cautious around. And so obviously having that secured is going to be important then for your strategy as well. Now, beyond that, from a Teams perspective, let's go through some of the features real quick because I think these are where you're going to start learning a little bit more of what you can do, obviously, within Teams to really drive it. So first and foremost, as you can see here, I've got my account details that are inside of here, but in my Teams interface, if I click on my settings in here, for example, there are some features that are really kind of nice to have and to have enabled typically as part of that as well. So as you can see here, auto starting, so opening up Teams when your computer boots up, typically that's check marked. I'm typically starting it up manually because I don't want it popping up. The other thing to note though is that remember with Microsoft 365, you can actually set up Teams then so that basically it will actually be the chat app then in M365. So all chat interaction then is going to be stored obviously inside of Teams as well. There are other features features as well that are really beneficial that you should consider when you're doing the setup, obviously, of teams. The first would be making sure that content-wise, when you do get new content, do you want it to open in the main window, or do you want it to open up, for example, inside of a new window? If you start a chat, do you want that chat to be opened up inside of a new window, or do you want it embedded inside of the main window? So this is a design concept, because many of the things inside of Teams have always been focused around having one main window that you interact with. And if you think about it, like if we want to have a Teams app in a mobile interface, or if we want to have Teams in tablet, or if we want to have Teams on a different operating system, the consistency with the main window versus a MDI, multiple document interface as we call it, which would be multiple windows, is the fact like on a phone, typically you don't have multiple windows open. You have to have back and forward and those actions that make that process flow effective on a phone. And so if you think about it, we have Teams on the phone. They've basically extended that design pattern to the desktop. And that was the initial release, only had that. But a lot of people complained against it because we were like, well, we got a computer. We don't have a phone. We're running Teams on a computer. Let's use the computer's capabilities of multiple windows to do that. So you can use, obviously, these to actually change the behavior then. So if you want to pop open another menu, you can do that as well. So really nice to have, and it's a basic feature that is actually often overlooked, but it can be very, I don't know, from a user interface perspective, very beneficial. Now, one of them that you should be looking at is going to be obviously this Copilot and chat, right? That's inside of here. And then also the Discover as well, right? So Copilot and chat, being able to then interact with it, and we're going to show that in just a second, to be able to have Copilot answer questions about chats and interact with it. Obviously, if you have the license and the details for it and you can check mark it, I'd recommend that you turn it on so that way you can use some of those Copilot-based capabilities. The Discover in your channel list, so at the very top, Discover, you can turn that off if you want to as well. Some people like having that Discover up there, whereas others do not. And then at the same point here, you can have things like spell check enabled or disabled, you know, and all those other features. And we're not going to go through every feature inside of here, but those are obviously the big ones that are there as well. So the other ones, just to kind of note that I want to highlight, really are around, for example, some of the interaction that you do then as well when it comes to, like, let's say you want to broadcast. So you're probably curious, like, Scott, how do you get other people then into Streamlabs here that you're using to stream this then to the platform? Well, what I'm doing actually is I'm using some of the actual setup inside of here to basically install an app that then allows my my video to be rebroadcasted. And we call that NDI inside of really our environment. And what you can do is that you can actually come into different areas inside of here to basically go through and then do the setup of that to then drive, for example, that NDI based capability. So as an example here, if we look at through some of these, like the calls, just want to double check, that's not it. If it's going to be the app permissions, yep, that's it. So you can see here as an example that NDI is something that you can actually use then to rebroadcast video. And what you would do is you would check mark that, and then what would happen is that the videos that you have when you're interacting in a Teams meeting, so you set up a Teams meeting or you meet now, and what will happen is that that video will be a source that you can then put into the stream. And how you see me in my box right here that I am kind of confined to, you can basically embed that inside of here. And we use that then in the app permissions by basically enabling NDI. And here's a good and bad thing, and this is feedback for Microsoft. At some point, maybe it gets to them, maybe it doesn't. Every time they do a new build, you have to update the NDI binaries. It'd be nice if somehow they didn't have to do that, because I've had many times before Confab where I'm like, oh no, they did a Teams update and I don't have the updated binaries, and you got to install a separate package then to be able to do that. So it's a nice feature, but obviously it would be something that we could probably do better in the future. Now, beyond that, the only other things I wanted to kind of just call out then inside of here, remember, for notifications and activities, you do have the ability with different types of notifications to have different sounds that are then played. So remember, there are people that you can set up, for example, as urgent and priority in conversations. And what can happen is you can have that play a different sound. So that way you know the difference between a standard notification, which might be just something in Teams that just, you know, happened in a channel, versus what is actually a priority notification. And as you can see here, you can actually have these different values that you can select from as part of that as well. So it does provide for some of those settings then to make quality of life a little bit nicer. And remember, what I'd really recommend for you to do is go through these settings so you can kind of see then, for example, like what is my priority access? How do I block calls with no caller ID? Like maybe that's something that you want. Or do you want to actually have surveys in Teams as you're going through that, right? So there's different types of settings that then interact with Teams that then expose some of these capabilities as you go through it. So something just to note, those big ones really are the ones I kind of mentioned to start here as part of this. Now, the other one that I want to kind of go through just really quickly here, let's start a chat here. And in the background, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new chat with Scott F at stoneridgesoftware.com. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do test and try sending that along and see if we can get to that particular user, which is an external user that I'm going to be texting from my other area. So in that situation, what we can see just really quickly, you can't see the notification bar that popped up, but you can see I've got this new chat that came from Scott Frappier, which is Scott F at stoneridgepresales.com, which is one of our pre-sales environments. And what you can see here is that we can see that it's an external chat that's actually been created with the person that's outside of our organization, and I have the ability then to accept or block potentially that user as a part of this. Now, the reason I mention this is because there's a lot of interaction that we have in our organization with external users that is going to be chat centric, and it's kind of good and bad. As a consulting firm, I'm just going to be super candid because I think Confab should be that. Right, like if you've got an implementation person that goes through an implementation and they're done with your site, for example, and then you're pinging them, well, it's good and bad because, right, it could actually expose that detail inside of here as part of that, and you're directly connecting to the consultant, which is good and bad because maybe that consultant's going through and implementing another site, for example, and then they are not responding as quickly, right? But the external chat is nice because, like, as an example, even I use it with some of our customers basically to coordinate, for example, schedules and details that are needed to basically drive business, right? And as you can see here, what I can do is I can accept that particular one, and then I can see, for example, Scott's test message that he sent to me as part of this. Now, there's a couple other things I can do too, and these are quality of life type things I just want to kind of call out. The first would be, for example, on my particular inquiry here, for example, for this end user, what I'm able to do is actually pull up that detail about that external user to then see, for example, some of the contact details that I may have with them, any LinkedIn details that are associated maybe with this particular person, right? And then on the overview here, for example, additional contact information that may then be related to that end user, right? So in this situation, it's kind of nice to be able to then interact with those areas. And as you can see, I can still go back and then block that contact, or even send a quick message saying, like, for example, test 2 here back to Scott at presales.com. And you can see just in the background here as it did that it popped up over here, and I see test 2 that's now over here as part of that. So nice feature in that regard to basically interact with those external chats. Now you can go beyond this, right? So as an example, we started with a chat, but remember, I could start a video call now basically with this person, right? Because Teams is all about collaboration. We may be going back and forth with chat, but we may need to call each other via video or audio. Well, as you can see here, what I can do on the chat for the contact that I'm interacting with, I can basically go ahead and then do that video call or audio call by just clicking on then up here that particular meet now option. I can do things as well like add other people to the group. So like Leah, I said I was going to add you. What I can do is I can say I'm going to add Leah into this chat with us, and then from here, as you can see, hello all, this is a confab test, right? So then all of a sudden what's going to happen is I'm going to get that chat, and I'm going to have, for example, inside of my other one, that detail added me to a group chat that I can see inside of here now, and then I can accept it because remember, Leah is now engaged inside of this conversation, and you can see inside of here that I've basically been able to add then multiple people then to this group chat. Now here's another little hidden feature that I think is pretty cool. Well, hello Leah. I know you're doing your multitasking, right? So here's another couple features that are kind of fun about this. First and foremost, if you look at the profile picture up here on the top left, if I click on that profile picture, I can, in a group chat, override basically the icon that's being displayed up there. So if I wanted to say that this one, for example, is a very thinking face type chat that we want to have, what I can do is I can take that chat, make that change, save it away, and we're going to see on the top left that that group picture is now changed. And the cool thing about this is that you can also upload your own pictures if you want to basically then reflect what that value is going to be inside of here. So nice quality of life, grouping of chats. It's really kind of nice because if you think about it, if you want to take this chat, for example, and maybe pin it, right? So it shows up in your pinned chats inside of here. Well, you've got a nice visual indicator that you can use basically to get to that detail as well. So a nice little feature in that regard as we kind of go through that. Now, other ones that I just want to kind of highlight really revolve around a couple of the other capabilities that are inside of here as well. Thinking face equals perfect for this, right? Right, Leah? We're getting deep here, right? So obviously, you can go ahead and then even, for example, name the chat. So this is the thinking people chat is what we'll call it. Save that away. And as you can see now, it's not just Leah and Scott. It's basically the thinking people chat and the participants here. If I click on the add participants, I can see who is a part of basically this chat. And once again, if I want to add more people, I can do that pretty easily inside of here as well. Now, there are other features that I just want to kind of highlight here that we'll talk through that are newer inside of actually July, August, around that time period is when we started seeing these features roll out for Teams. The first is using Control F to search, right? So if I want to search for hi inside of this chat, we can see then that I can hit Control F and then search for that particular word or phrase inside of chat, right? This is awesome. Like, just so nice. Quality of life. Control F on channels. Control F basically inside of chat to be able to find that detail if you know that you've got some chat details inside of there. So a really nice feature basically to go through and get to that detail in it as well. Now, a couple of the other things I want to note. Remember, we can, from within a chat, actually do a couple of things. Number one, we could actually meet now as an example. And if I click on that meet now, don't worry, Leah, I won't do it. I won't put you on the spot. But if I click on that meet now, what it's going to do is it's actually going to take the participant list and then call everyone to create a meeting on demand. And so this is a really nice feature because there are many times, as you can imagine, where you'd go into Outlook, schedule the team for 15 minutes at a time. Whereas if you've got everyone in chat right now, just click on the meet now and you can get everyone basically on that chat basically right away to start having some conversation. So a really nice feature in that regard to be able to move things forward. You can also do things like schedule a meeting or even do screen sharing. And this is another newer feature as well, where we've always had the ability to do screen share inside of Teams. It's just now inside of a chat, we can use that to basically go through and then broadcast a screen. And I just used this with Keith Bangasser recently as we basically were trying to solve an issue. Well, I used that to basically align that particular work, and we were able to do that really easily. So really kind of nice in that regard to be able to do that. And then the final one I like to kind of call out, this wonderful mute action, right? So here's the mute. I'm sure you all have had it happen. People get excited. People have a big group meeting, and all of a sudden you get all these pop-ups that are occurring constantly after that meeting, right? You're in an important broadcast and you don't want those to pop up every 2 seconds, right? Well, what you can do is you can mute conversations as well. This has been a feature that's there for a while, but I do want to mention it because it is something that I do know for a fact that I have personally even witnessed, where all of a sudden I'm getting tons of pop-ups that I'm like, I can't have this. Well, you can mute it. Or what you can do, remember, for your status changes, if you change it to do not disturb, only those priority ones that you've denoted as priority individuals will then notify you as part of it, right? Key thing to remember, best practice. Make sure you take off do not disturb when you're done, because if you have do not disturb on, calls and texts or chat don't go to you, or they go to you and they don't notify you, right, type of a thing. And for phone calls, that's been a big problem that I've seen as well in the past, right? So something to note is that you can do that, and what you can also do is now set up this duration, so that way you can automatically have it go through and then change basically your status back to busy, available, whatever that value is, as part of that. And that's a really nice feature. That's newer as well, but it's really kind of nice then from a presence perspective to keep your presence kind of updated. And that's another thing I want to note too. Presence, it's not fully accurate. Like, I know for a fact that all of a sudden I'll go to chat somebody and they were green and it turns yellow to away immediately. If you're using presence as a manager to see where people are at, you're going to be disappointed because there's lots of ways to basically hard code presence so that you know or don't know where that is. I use it as a general tool to see if somebody may be currently available. If they're do not disturb, for example, I really contemplate on whether or not I want to message them because I know if they're in do not disturb, I'm not going to get a reaction immediately. So you've got to figure out, obviously, that from a policy and from a cultural perspective as well. But just note that presence, like I said, it's not fully accurate. So you're going to see sometimes where people look like they're available, but they're not, right? So, but it is nice to be able to see that and to be able to reflect really where you're at. Typically on Confab, my presence is actually do not disturb, but because we're playing around with teams, I'm obviously not concerned about that, right? So let's keep on going with this chat a little bit more too, because there's other features inside of here that are kind of nice. One of those is, for example, emojis that you can add. And so as an example here, if you want to react, we all know these features, right? If we've used Messenger or many of the other messaging products that are out there, you can have your thumbs up, your surprise, your laugh, right? Or you can add more reactions that are related to it. But one of the features that you may not know is the fact that you can actually go through and then edit your default reactions inside of here. So for example, laugh and love and yes are some that I use all the time. I usually don't use surprised, but I use the 100 quite a bit, like I 100% agree, or everything is parted. It is perfect, right? So what I can do is I can actually customize those actions then, so that way when I'm hovering over then my actions, I'm going to have those defaults that are exposed inside of here. So that way if you've got some default emojis that you want to use as part of it, typically I'll use emojis as much as possible to, for example, make sure that my communication is being, or I'm affirming their communication, for example, like with a thumbs up at a minimum. So, obviously these emojis are kind of nice in that regard as well to be able to do that. Now, other things that you can do inside of here, right? So I'm going to do a /, and this is something that a lot of people don't know about. And it's actually a really critical feature, but inside of Teams, remember, the / has context and meaning, right? And what I mean by that is that if I'm in a chat and I do a / as an example, you can see that I have all these different types of commands that I can issue as part of that, right? So looks like Leah's got, how much I love that, right? Yeah, amen. And then I can maybe do 100, right? So yeah, but the / here, if you see inside of my chat, allows me to, for example, open this chat in a window. So I just did that, and then boom, I've got the chat now open inside of a window inside of here. I can set, for example, my settings for this chat. So if I go ahead and do that, we're going to see it opens up the settings that are related then to really the settings of the application, right? If I do my / again, I can leave chat, or I can set myself to busy, or I can say I'm going to be right back type of a thing, right? So as you can see then my status changed up here to away. It's yellow now. Whereas if I want to make myself busy, I can use basically that particular command. And as you can see there, as I auto-completed it, it actually went through and then finished that as well, right? So a nice feature in that regard to basically be able to interact with different type of statuses. And here's the thing too, team. Like if I go back to my teams and we click on our search up here and I do that / as well, very similar, right? So I can do, am I available, chat, away, busy, right? This in itself, the /, yeah, Clyde's saying it, you beat me to it, Clyde, is life-changing once you understand what it can do and how apps themselves can even then integrate with it as well. And let's keep building a little bit more off of that. So as an example, let's go through and let's make it so that I want to do what's called a loop paragraph. So loop is a concept where basically you can actually snap in different types of controls that then make a chat more interactive or trackable, or it's a component of a paragraph that maybe you use somewhere else. So loop in itself is a component framework that's designed to allow you to take those content, like I almost view it like, imagine InfoPath back in the day, like those forms. Imagine being able to take that and embed it inside of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, whatever it is. Well, loop is kind of that concept. So as an example here, if I do a loop paragraph inside of here, what I can do is I can basically create, for example, a title. So let's say we're going to vote how cool this is, right? And what I can do is I can say I want a voting table that's inside of here. And what I could say is, like, for example, these features are awesome, or these features are not awesome, right? So we'll do the negative Nelly as part of it too. And what I can do, as you can see here, is that I can actually go ahead and then manage access related to this, right? To create this loop paragraph as an example. But what I can also do is then change on the fly who has access then to this loop that I'm actually creating inside of here. So what I could do is I could create that, drive that particular loop inside of here, and then from here, Leah would be able to come in, and I'll do, because it's confab, and I can see Leah is actually in here now as well, so she has the component actually open, so that if you want to build like tables really dynamically, for example, and then take that content and then share it. So what you can do is you can copy that component as an example, and then you could take that detail, and we'll go into our general tab as an example here. And then what I could do is actually go ahead and then start or create a new post that's related to it. And even then, for example, potentially embed that loop component that is inside of here as part of that, or a link to it, so I can get back basically to that loop component to then interact with it. So we'll just kind of open that up in the background just really quickly. But what should happen here is that that loop component should eventually pop up for me then to interact with if I did it right. So that way then I could take this and use it in different areas of OneNote, PowerPoint, wherever it may be. And as you can see here, it's only 1 hour, right? Right, Leah? That's what Leah added. You can see that we're able to then go through and then interact with it. So this loop concept is going to become more important in the future in my mind as well, meaning loop inside of Dynamics. Like I want it so that inside of Dynamics 365 Sales in our timeline, that if I do something like this, that that component will now be accessible inside of the timeline. Those are going to be some of those features that you're definitely going to want in the future as a part of that. So if you haven't used that loop component, definitely recommend that you consider it, because it does provide a lot of great capability in that regard as well. So beyond loop then, let's just take a quick look. Remember, we do have the ability then to use Copilot, right, as well inside of here, right? So some of those capabilities as code, like code blocks, loop that's inside of here, be right back, right? One of the features that we have, obviously, is the Copilot integration as part of that, right? So this chat needs more conversation to be able to really interact basically with Copilot. Let's see if I can pick one, for example, that's fairly benign, that then has a lot of content that we could actually go through and talk about. So let's take, for example, I'm going to move this off to the side just really quickly. Yep, okay, that's what we'll do. Jesse, we're going to use your chat. So Jesse and I have had lots and lots of different chats, right? And so what I want to do here is just make sure, like I said, this is fairly benign. Yep, we're good. And then what I want to do, all right, so here's our chat. We were talking about some licensing that we want to get aligned, some team meeting, and then the rescheduling of our one-on-one, right? So basically inside of here, remember, same concept with Jesse. If I wanted to go ahead and leave the conversation, use any of these different actions, I could do that. I could add an app even. So if there's an app that we want to interact with, for example, inside of Teams, inside of this chat, like if I want to add a poll app or maybe a to-do app or a form app inside of here, I could do that and then add it to the chat as a part of it. Now, what I want to do from a Copilot perspective is use some of the Copilot details to maybe, for example, summarize conversation, right? So an example might be, can you summarize the main points from our conversation in the last week, right? Something like that we can ask Copilot as an example. And then on our far right, what we're going to see is the main points obviously are going to then pop up here on the far right that show, for example, we've got a discovery call that he's going to be tackling. I rescheduled our one-on-one. We agreed to a one-on-one time because the one I initially didn't align, right? And then Jesse said, all right, not a problem. We'll go ahead and acknowledge that, right? So Copilot now inside of Teams allows us to actually have time periods that we can actually specify to then summarize that detail. So I could say, summarize my conversations with Jesse in January of 2024, right, type of a thing. So, and you'll see here now, because it understands the context of it, there's no content from our policy perspective, but what will happen is it knew exactly that conversation for January 1st to January 31st, and it says here that you don't have any content that's related to it, right? So this is good, right? This is what we want to see, as if we don't have data, I don't want Copilot making something up, right, to not be truthful. In this situation, it's also aware then of that context sensitivity that you have as part of that as well. So this Copilot-based capability, remember, I'm not sure if they've added, for example, the Copilot capability here yet, but those are going to be actions that hopefully in the future we're going to start seeing that you can then interact with inside of these prompts. And the other thing to note is that there are prompt suggestions that they typically create that you can interact with. So once again, try some of them, see how they work for you, but it's a nice addition compared to chat, where maybe you can summarize some detail a lot quicker than in a chat to be able to drive that. Now, this goes beyond just that chat, right? So if I go ahead and expose this a little bit more, remember, Copilot can be used as well across many different areas or many different chats, right? So inside of Teams, one of the things that you could do is click on your Copilot chat up at the top here, and then your Copilot assistant comes out here that allows me then to basically go through and then interact basically with Copilot inside of Teams. So as an example here, I could say summarize my chats from yesterday and create an action item list that I need to tackle, right? Something like that. And so this is, I'm doing this team on the fly to see how well it does, because I want to make sure, obviously, that this product is going to be exactly what we say it is. And as each iteration of these models gets better, we're starting to see better and better interactivity, speed, and performance with it. So I can see we've got a couple conversations. We had our MBR yesterday. We had Primex as well, which is another opportunity we're working on. We had some rescheduling that we did with our one-on-ones. We have some action items that were created as a part of this, right? So what's really cool about this is that the Copilot-based capability basically went through and discovered some of those details. And so I could do things like this and say, what was Jesse and I talking about this last week in chat, right? Something like that. And let's see what it says and what it finds. And just like we had with our other stuff, we've got some one-on-one opportunity meeting that was happening, and then basically that's kind of it, right? So and I mentioned that I was rebooting Teams and hopping on, which is accurate. So that's really the last kind of conversations with Jesse that I had as part of this. So like I said, this is really kind of nice, right, in terms of being able to find information. Another example of it might be what was the last RFP document that I worked on in I'll just do it. I'll do it as simple as that. Let's see what it says and see if it can identify an RFP that I went through. So this is kind of fun, right? Yeah, that would be it actually. So that is correct. So once again, you can see Jesse's kind of typing in the background. He's probably like, what you doing over there? But either way, this is kind of nice to be able to basically go through and get information. And one final thing, remember, it doesn't have to be chats. So summarize my emails from yesterday and create an action item list that I can review, right? And this is in Teams. I'm not in my email, right? So what it's doing is it's going through and then identifying all the different types of items that I had come in, for example, for these particular opportunities that I'm interacting with. I've got my lunch and learn I'm going to be doing for JDH. I've got some pre-sales expenses that I actually went through and submitted and completed that. And here's the thing I really like about this is that by default, I'm already keeping track of all these different to-dos and action items that I have. But what I do inside of here is I have this prompt set up so that every morning I can run that prompt and I can compare it against my list of what I anticipated. And I've actually had it a couple times where it's caught a couple that I missed inside of here to be able to drive that. So this is a really nice feature in terms of then using some of that Copilot capability to be able to really go through and unify, obviously, some of that data. Now, once again, it goes even further, right? So let's go a little bit further as well with this. So with Copilot introduction, being able to use these Copilot agents is also another feature that's becoming very, very prominent. And what are Copilot agents? Well, agents allow for me basically to create an autonomous individual, almost like a person, right, that can interact basically with a particular topic or subject that you can then use for interaction, right? And as you can see here, it's asking me, like, what do you want to create as an example to basically drive that Copilot agent? So I want to maybe, for example, I would like my Copilot to be able to go through and describe certain elements of the Stoneridge playbook that we use for implementation processes, right? Implementation, we'll do it like that, right? So that's what I'm saying I want this to be, right? And so looks like I've got a little timeout that happened here as part of it. So let's see if I can unbreak it by creating an agent, doing it again, and seeing if that timeout, looks like I got a timeout issue. But either way, the nice thing about the Copilot agents, like I can go to the describe to create it, or I can do it the old-fashioned way, right? Where I could put in what that description is, the instructions that are related to it, and what I can do is I can actually access then a knowledge base that I could use, and then even identify, for example, the external blogs, right, as an example. So we're going to use blogs inside of here for this. And then also maybe I want to add a specific URL, or maybe it's the playbook that's inside of here. And what would happen then is it can create that autonomous agent then that you can interact with to then ask those questions. So think about like an autonomous agent that addresses HR type issues, where if you have questions about the plan that you have or what that plan detail is, somebody could come up here, create in Copilot Studio that agent, configure it, and then boom, you can deploy that on the far left here so that you can then interact basically with that particular app inside of here to be able to drive that. So this is a really, really, really powerful feature, and I am expecting this to become even more common when it comes to Teams. And you probably saw it, but look at what it's using to do it. Copilot Studio. So it's really creating an agent inside of Copilot Studio that you could then take and expose in different applications. We could take that and put it in Dynamics, for example, or we could take that agent and then use it inside of Word when the sidecar pops out for it. So it just really gives you some great capability that you can really quickly create an agent around, knowing that it may not be perfect, but it's going to be really good to start. And then as they build out some of these other capabilities like actions, right, where you can actually then have, for example, I could create an action in Copilot Studio that looks at data inside of Dynamics 365. And I could actually do that in global, meaning I could actually set up in Copilot Studio that if you ask about contacts, customers, vendors, purchase orders, or sales orders, so I could refine that scope, and I could say, here are the tables that you can ask data around. Well, then I can have one action that says inquire ERP system, and for those main data elements, it can then grab that data and then bring it back and then display it inside of Teams. So once again, we're getting into this world like we had before, but even more so now, where these technologies are interchangeable with each other and then can be reused as you go through that. And once again, And looks like Jesse was hoping for some CE collaboration tools today too, huh? Up, Jesse, we got you covered, right? So what we can do there, once again, from a collaboration perspective, remember for apps wise, we do have the ability as well to embed then Dynamics applications inside of absolutely chats or channels as well. So in this example, what I'm doing is I'm adding, for example, that Dynamics 365 experience for this, and then I'm going to post it about that in the actual chat channel. But what I can do is I can then select, for example, the environment that I'm working with. So maybe we'll do Stoneridge software. So I'll find our production environment. I can select then the app. Maybe it's sales and marketing as an example that we use for it. So I could come in here and Jesse's typing in the background. Yeah, there's the GIF, right? Sales and marketing app, right? And then what I can do is I can then go ahead and select what type of entity maybe I want to interact with. So what I can do here is maybe go to an account that we have as an example, click on save, and then even in that chat, what I see now is that I'm embedded basically with Dynamics 365 inside of here as well. So just heads up, the reason I'm kind of mentioning this from a Teams perspective is that if you want your Dynamics data also to be inside of here, to be in a chat or to be in a channel, you can click on the add a tab action inside of here, and then what's going to happen is you're going to be able to basically go ahead and then interact obviously with that data then inside of that environment. And we can see here, here's an account record that pops up as an example with all the details of this account record. It's natively inside of Teams, which is a pretty cool capability. So just something to note is that we didn't talk a lot about the Dynamics collaboration perspective because we wanted to take a little bit more on Copilot and some of the team-centric capabilities. But as you can see here, there's even more in CE, where if you start in sales, you can create team sites, for example, from within sales that then drive that. So there's a lot of different options that we have to really drive that as part of that. So I guess, team, with that, we're at about time. I saw a lot of good chat that was happening in the background here. Like I said, I hope there was maybe one thing that you learned out of this, right? In terms of how you interact with chat, how you can change icons, how you can interact with external users, how you can use the components to drive it, how you can connect Dynamics, how you can use Copilot, right? There's just a lot of great capabilities just natively inside of Teams that you should be considering. And I'll tell you this, just quite candidly, I can't imagine a world now without Teams when it comes to the collaboration. With Copilot, it's helping with that fragmentation, as I call it, where I get some requests from email and other from chat, for example. I'm able to now use Copilot to kind of unify that to say, look at all chats and email and identify all key actions or action items that are needed. So once again, it does boil down to you're going to have to learn how to use some of these tools then to basically shift some of that, because you are going to be more productive collaboratively with Teams. But the downside is that now you don't have your email for all interaction with people. You may have chats that you have to consider as well. So just something to note, use Copilot to help with that. Create those prompts, and it'll make your life a lot easier as you go through those processes. With that, team, I just want to say thank you for everyone that was able to make it. It's going to be a crazy day for many parents, I believe, as you bring your kids out trick-or-treating, so make sure to have fun and stay safe. On November 14th, we're going to have a much bigger confab. We're going to do a confab on the use of Copilot to implement software. It's been one I've wanted to do now, and we're going to set that as the schedule for it. But in the future here, I don't understand why we're not using Copilot to do setup. Like, why aren't we using Copilot to say, hey, I'm in this industry, build me a chart of accounts, right? I know what's happening in our team, which is pretty cool to see, and we even heard on our report out recently that there's more and more people that are using Copilot as they're doing setup and configuration, obviously, of our products. That's fantastic. The marriage of the repository of knowledge through AI and then the experience of the individual that's implementing, to me, is a really powerful proposition for our prospects and for our customers. So on the 14th, we're going to have a proof of concept that we're going to dig into. We're going to start a Business Central environment, and we're going to build a company on Confab. And hopefully by the end of the hour, we'll have a company that we can do transactions in. and it's not going to be fake, it's going to be real. So it should be fun. We'll see what happens. We've got our leadership meeting next week that we're going to be talking more about that, and then obviously the 14th is when we're going to cover that topic, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So make sure to let others know, because if you are a consultant or somebody that's curious on the real practical use of AI and how it can actually reduce the cost of an implementation, this is going to be the confab to go to. With that, everyone, thank you again for your time. Really great to be able to be online again, because it's been a couple weeks since we've been able to do confab. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. But beyond that, have a safe and happy Halloween, and we will see you on November 14th. Thank you all.